Teraz możesz zająć się tym, co naprawdę ważne, bo inne ważne sprawy, jak koszenie trawy, zrobią się same, o każdej porze, niezależnie od pogody. A Ty korzystaj z każdej chwili, ciesz się życiem i doskonale skoszonym trawnikiem. Husqvarna. Roboty koszące Automower. Wejdź na husqvarna.pl i odwiedź dealera.
Historia firmy rozpoczęła się kilkanaście lat temu, kiedy to zaoferowaliśmy naszym klientom pierwsze urządzenia do pielęgnacji ogrodu. Były to kosiarki, podkaszarki, pilarki. W następnych latach poszerzyliśmy naszą ofertę o maszyny specjalistyczne, aeratory, kosiarki wrzecionowe, piaskarki. Jednak maszyny to nie wszystko.
Kolejnym etapem w rozwoju firmy było wprowadzenie specjalistycznych nawozów, nasion traw oraz sprzętu diagnostycznego. Pielęgnacja trawy to nie tylko koszenie, to szereg działań, które wymaga od nas pasji i zaangażowania. To tylko dzięki temu osiągniemy właściwy sukces. Wszystkie nasze działania opieramy na ludziach, na specjalistach, którzy na co dzień pracują na polach golfowych, boiskach i stadionach. To ciężka praca, wymagająca dużego zaangażowania, często 24 godziny na dobę.
To właśnie pasja doprowadziła nas do momentu, w którym mogliśmy uczestniczyć w wydarzeniach takich jak Mistrzostwa Świata i Europy w piłce nożnej w roku 2017 i 2019 oraz w jednym z najważniejszych turniejów golfowych w Polsce Gradi Polish Open by Emerald w roku 2020.
Mieliśmy również zaszczyt być partnerem konferencji organizowanej na Zamku Królewskim w Warszawie pod tytułem Autentyzm, ochrona i zarządzanie. Dzisiaj na stałe doradzamy na ogrodach Zamku Królewskiego pod względem właściwej pielęgnacji trawników i ogrodów.
Chcemy dzielić się wiedzą i zarażać pasją kolejne pokolenia greenkeeperów i groundsmenów. Na naszych szkoleniach dla obiektów sportowych, pól golfowych, firm usługowych prezentujemy najnowsze rozwiązania z zakresu pielęgnacji muraw trawiastych. Przeprowadzamy audyty, doradzamy w inwestycjach związanych z budową stadionów piłkarskich i boisk. Każdego dnia poszukujemy odpowiedzi na pytanie, jak właściwie pielęgnować trawnik.
Nasz cel to szmaragdowy kolor, taki jak logo naszej firmy.
Podstawowym budulcem każdego ogrodu jest ziemia. Dlatego nasz spacer po królewskich ogrodach rozpoczniemy od zejścia pod ziemię. To tutaj, 4 metry pod ziemią, rozpoczyna się nasza 12-kilometrowa trasa nawadniająca ogrody. To również stąd sterujemy naszymi fontannami i oświetleniem. To była techniczna strona naszego ogrodu, a teraz wracamy na górę. Rabata kwietna to jedna z naszych największych atrakcji. 4 razy w sezonie zmieniamy jej wygląd, aby zawsze była piękna i świeża. Zabytkowy labirynt grabowy to serce naszego ogrodu. To na nim oparto ideę odtworzenia ogrodów dolnych, gdyż najstarsze drzewa przetrwały działania wojenne. Trawiasty wgłębnik w centralnej części naszego ogrodu to oddech dla kompozycji ogrodów dolnych. Świeża i zielona trawa przyciąga uwagę naszych zwiedzających, a trawnik wygląda świetnie w każdej porze roku. Ogrody zamkowe to także ostoja zwierzyny. Ptaki i drobne zwierzęta futerkowe to nasi stali bywalcy. Obecnie znajdujemy się w Boskiecie Południowym, który nie przetrwał działań wojennych i został w całości odtworzony. Warto tu także zajrzeć przez wzgląd na fantastyczną rzeźbę smoczycy, która od niedawna gości w naszych ogrodach. Królewskie Ogrody to niepowtarzalne miejsce na mapie Warszawy, idealne do odpoczynku i relaksu. Każda rezydencja królewska marzy o tym, aby posiadać własną odmianę róży, w ogóle własną odmianę kwiatu. Posiadanie takiej odmiany jest wyjątkowe pod każdym względem, zarówno pod kątem odmiany, jak i pod kątem samego posiadania, gdyż nie jest to działalność łatwa, aby wyhodować taką różę i nabyć ją na własność. W Zamku Królewskim w Warszawie również mamy ten historyczny moment, kiedy róża przyjechała do zamku i będziemy mieć własną odmianę. Nazwa Królowa Warszawy nawiązuje zarówno do historii ogrodnictwa i historii sztuki ogrodowej, jak i do tego, gdzie się znajdujemy, czyli rezydencja królów i Rzeczypospolitej.
Znajdujemy się w ogrodach dolnych Zamku Królewskiego w Warszawie. Mogę sobie tylko wyobrazić, jak bardzo cieszyłby się król Stanisław, kiedy po 123 latach, trudnych dla Polski i bardzo różnych, wreszcie jego projekt został zrealizowany. A jak nie świętować inaczej, jak w dobry sposób, nadając imię dla róży, która ma uświetnić ogrody Zamku Królewskiego. Bywa tak, że to róża uświetnia miejsce, dodaje mu splendoru. Bywa też odwrotnie, że to samo miejsce dodaje splendoru róży. W połączeniu tych dwóch motywacji, jeżeli się uda, powstaje fenomen, który przekracza ludzkie życie, w pewien sposób dając i róży, i miejscu nieśmiertelność. I chrzest róży, nadanie jej nowego imienia jest również takim celebrowaniem życia, dobrą chwilą i dla miejsca, i dla ogrodu, i dla nas wszystkich.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome sincerely to the gardens of the Royal Castle in Warsaw. A hot and sunny summer brings us beautifully to the 11th episode of the webinars on garden artistry, titled The Sunny Gardens of Italy. Please remember that we are broadcasting in Polish and English today. Please choose the appropriate channel of transmission. Today, we have a beautiful journey to Italy. However, we will not go there alone, since our wonderful friends from the European route of Historical Gardens will show us the most wonderful locations tied to Italian garden artistry. Roberto Vezzani, the coordinator of the Erasmus Royal Route of Historical Gardens, and the representative of the National Carlo Collodi Foundation, and Professor Maria Adriana Giusti, the guardian of the Garzoni Gardens in Collodi, invite you to the wonderful journey presenting the beauty of Italian gardens. And after the lecture, you will remain with us in sunny and tasty Italy with Robert Makłowicz. Following, the Kwiaty and Miód duet will invite you to florist impressions to their organic farm near to Poznań.
Welcome everybody. The National Carlo Collodi Foundation and the Historic Garzoni Garden are very glad to participate in the webinar series 4 Seasons in the Gardens. The National Carlo Collodi Foundation is located in Collodi, which is part of the municipality of Pescia in Tuscany. Carlo Collodi, the author of Pinocchio, used to visit Collodi because the family of his mother lived here, and he took his pen name from this place. So in Collodi, the National Carlo Collodi Foundation preserves and promotes the legacy of Pinocchio's writer, and it owns and manages several attractions, and specifically the polycentric park Collodi Pinocchio, which includes the Pinocchio Park, an open-air museum that was opened in the 1950s, and then also the historic Garzoni garden that was completed in the 18th century, and the butterfly house. The topic of today's webinar is the sunny gardens of Italy. I am pleased to introduce to you the Professor Maria Adriana Giusti, who is going to talk about this the topic, the sunny gardens of Italy. Professor Giusti is a member of the governing board of the National Carlo Collodi Foundation, and she's the scientific director of the historic Garzoni garden. She has taught at the Polytechnic University of Turin, and she has studied carefully the European historic garden in several works, conferences, publications. I invite Professor Giusti to intervene, and I thank very much Mrs. Monica Bragg from the Royal Castle in Warsaw for having invited us to participate at the webinar series Four Seasons in the Gardens.
Sunny Gardens of Italy. The summer trail in Italian gardens begins with a symbolic image. The statue of abundance representing the allegory of summer, characterized by the presence of ears of corn and the cornucopia. Summer as a synonym for prosperity, wealth, opulence, but also of life in the open air, of music, shows, and meetings. The red thread of summer in Italian gardens is based on certain fundamental paradigms. The myth and statuary alluding to the seasonal transit where summer, Demeter, Proserpine, Ceres, is the season of abundance of the fruits of the garden of utilitas and the flowers of the garden of delight. 2. The staging of these allegories linked to seasonal metamorphoses. 3. The dialect between light and shade. The shape of the garden, a projection of the habitat outside. 4. The verdure theater as a specialized place for life and summer performances. Between the 16th and 17th centuries, many collections of allegorical illustrations flourished, among the most famous being the iconology composed by Cesare Ripa in 1593, a kind of encyclopedia that illustrates, lists, and describes the personifications of abstract concepts that artists could use. In Iconologia Ripa offers his readers a useful repertoire of symbolic images, where the image becomes part of the narrative of the garden. We can say that Ripa responds to a new need linked to the interest in images used to symbolically represent the theme of metamorphosis. This narrative thread is embodied in a very concept of the Italian garden as a place of vision, as a theater from the ancient Greek, as a specialized space in the theatrical sense, to host performances, or the garden as a place of seasonal metamorphoses, of changes of scene that are spectacularized in the summer context. Our narrative is based on this double meaning. The Italian garden is dominated by myths of ancient origin that illustrate metamorphosis and the passage of the seasons. From the light-shadow contrast descends mythical metaphors that characterize the Mannerist and Baroque grottos of Italian gardens, places of nocturnal forces, of the elements, of the Dionysian and Apollonian components that are juxtaposed with the sunny esplanades. Allegorical statues accompany the paths that wind through water, earth, and vegetation, where the 4 seasons are a metaphor for the great theater of nature. The basis is time, passage, change, metamorphosis, where each season has its own colors, its own forms, its own beauty. In the rites of seasonal passage, the sunlight is the protagonist. The Garden of the Origins, as a reflection of paradise, is traditionally represented as an enclosure of light compared to the darkness of chaos. Light is declined in the sunshine that reaches its peak in the summer season. Hence, the long time of nature and the use of the garden, which in summer is experienced as a house with the succession of green rooms, each conceived as a place of rest and entertainment. Summer, Demeter, Proserpine, Ceres is the season of abundance, of fruits from the garden of Utilitas and flowers from the garden of Delight. Citrus fruits represent the synthesis of the 2 worlds, Utilitas and Delight, linked to these is the myth of the Hesperides, sung by a humanist like Giovanni Pontano. Spoleto 1429 and died in Naples 1503. In De Hortis Hesperidum 1501, who grew citrus fruits on the island of Ischia, and by Joe Baptiste Ferrari Senensi, born in Siena 1584, died in Siena 1655. Jesuit and botanist, author of De Forum Cultura 1633, who, in his book Hesperides, Sua de Malorum Aureorum Cultura, 4 books written in Latin in 1646, illustrating the many types of citrus fruits grown in Italian gardens. As the title of the book indicates, the central theme is the mythical garden of the Hesperides, compared with the contemporary flowering of the Italian garden during the Golden Age of the Roman house of Barberini. The print shown here is based on a drawing by Giusto Reni depicting allegorical figures representing the Hesperides themselves and various gardeners planting trees and tending the garden of the orangery. The same toil of Hercules in the garden of the Hesperides, evoked by Giova Battista Ferrari in his book on citrus fruits, who cunningly reconquers the golden apples stolen by Atlas, that is, the citrus fruits, probably represents one of the 12 trials that followers must face before initiation. Also linked to this is the dance of the Minotaur that forms the basis of the labyrinth theme, culminating in the defeat of the Minotaur himself and continuing by changing the direction of rotation to form a spiral in the shape of cranes. These birds fly towards the garden of the Hesperides with the tree of golden apples, the fruit that makes one immortal. The initiates of the mysteries cross the borders of the afterlife and resurrect through Apollo, god of the sun. Various mythical allegories refer to the theme of the passage of the seasons, to time which marks the succession of the seasons, to which the cycle of nature and the life of the garden itself is linked. For these reasons, the mythical transfiguration of time characterizes the iconographic programs of numerous gardens, including that of Villa Santini near Lucca, which plays on the nocturnal of the grotto in the garden of the Hesperids and the solar of the palace's Seine fronts, recalling the verses of Ovid, Metamorphoses, Book 2. High stood the palace of the sun on immense columns, all gleams of gold and flames of copper. Villa Santini Torrigiani Colonna concentrates the duality between the sun and the shadows of the grottos and woods that surround the garden, the fish pond and the fountains. The palazzo of the sun, which determines the ziggurat structure of the building, is juxtaposed with the underground garden with the Grotta dei Venti, dominated by Flora, who blossoms in the parterre, which is colored with flowers in summer. All around are potted lemons, the evergreen plants that are removed from the limonaia in summer and displayed along the garden paths. The potted citrus fruits are the stars of the summer. When the plant displays flowers and fruit together amidst the foliage. There is no villa in Tuscany and the rest of Italy that does not have a lemon house to shelter citrus fruits in winter, after the Medici were the first to spread the practice. The oldest example is the lemon house in the Villa Medicea di Castello in Florence. In the splendid and historic garden, there is a very important collection of lemons and other citrus fruits, about 500, both rare and prized, which in winter find shelter in the villa's 2 lemon houses, a small one to the east and a larger one known also as the Stanzone degli Agrumi to the west. The latter has a rammed earth floor and houses the oldest plants in the garden. Due to the size of the historical specimens, it takes about a month to shelter them. Some examples can be found in the Villa Reale in Marlia, the Villa Santini Torrigiani Colonna, the Villa Garzoni, but there are many other examples from the villas of the lakes in northern Italy to the Agumette gardens in the south. This is a characteristic of most Italian gardens, from Boboli to the Medici Villa in Castello, to the Villas Reale di Marlia, Santini Torrigiani Colonna, and finally Garzoni di Collodi, just to mention a few of the most important Tuscan villas. Citrus trees in pots express the summer season. Along the sunny terrace of the Garzoni garden, special stone gutters provide the necessary water for the citrus plants, which lean against the retaining walls, protecting them from the wind. This is the avenue of Pomona, located in the middle of the garden's theatrical structure. Italian gardens are assigned summer, not only because of the Mediterranean climate, which prolongs the duration of light, the proliferation of blossoms and fruit trees, but because of the very shape of the garden and the allegorical narratives underlying it. Light, both artificial and natural, is a tool for composing and giving depth effects, alternating very bright, treeless spaces with shady ones, tightly packed with trees. In this way, the moon and the sun, shadow and light, can help us give the garden its true character, a symbiosis of man and nature, of reality and mystery. The garden of light is filled with the colors of summer blossoms, highlighted by potted citrus plants. These areas exposed to the sun's rays are framed by the green wings of the hedges, which determine the scenography of nature. This metaphor highlights diachronic passages and constructive characters through literature, specialized treatise, and iconography. It demonstrates how light is the fundamental parameter structuring the garden, helping to give it form and light, but also a tool for perception and knowledge. From the Renaissance treaty writer, we learn that when planting a garden, both nature and art must be taken into account. Gardens should not be sad and gloomy, overshadowed by an excess of shade, but create beautiful esplanades around buildings and in certain corners to be kept uncovered. This is why only small boxwoods and shrubs are inserted in the parterre, on the terraces and on the ramps, so that the greatness of the sky can be enjoyed without taking away the airspace. In these parterres, summer expresses the quintessence of floral colors. Summer is therefore linked to light, to the prolongation of the sun's rays on the flowers. But as we shall see, the use of light in the composition of gardens is linked to the theatrical culture at the heart of Italian garden. Since the Middle Ages, the Italian garden has been divided into regular compartments with uncovered parts and paths shaded throughout the day, protected from the winds so that it is possible to walk through them during the hottest hours of the day. Although the garden is designed for the more temperate seasons, it must also be enjoyable in summer and at all times of the day, from morning to evening, even on foggy days. The light together with the orientation, climate, altitude, and availability of water, determine the choice of plants, their location, and type according to the changing seasons. In this way, the garden, designed as a green architecture, offers its beauty in every season. Summer can therefore express an infinite variety of colors, accompanied by the freshness of the water features, fountains, grottos, labyrinths, theaters of greenery, and all those episodes that characterize the Italian garden. A garden structured as an evergreen architecture. If we want to summarize the character of the Italian garden, we can say that it is a garden conceived as an en plein air residence, with a sequence of rooms, of areas of shade and light. There is no sunny place in a garden without an adjoining area of shade. The passage from darkness to light is therefore identified with the passage from the chaotic nature of the landscape to the ordered nature of the garden. Light shadow, like summer and winter, is a metaphor of opposites that determines the structure of the garden at different scales. Architecture, hydraulics, and mythical statuary represent the fundamental components of the Italian garden in its classical, Renaissance, Baroque continuity. To return to the statue of abundance, which we saw at the beginning, this is found in the Boboli Gardens in Florence. The statue dominates the so-called Viottolone, which leads to the vast square known as the Isolotto, designed by Alfonso Parigi the Younger, 1606 to 1656. He was responsible for the large basin with the Isolotto and the steps of the amphitheater. The garden was built to the rear of Palazzo Pitti, with Bartolomeo Amanati's loggia framing the amphitheater and the garden terraces. It was first laid out by Tribolo in the second half of the 16th century, while subsequent interventions by the Habsburg, Lorraine, and Savoy families extended its boundaries to include the ancient city walls. A vast area divided up in a regular pattern, it is a veritable open-air museum populated with ancient and Renaissance statues, adorned with grottos, first and foremost the famous one designed by Bernardo Buontalenti, and large fountains such as those of Neptune and Ocean. The garden became a model for the European courts, affirming a scenographic spatial concept deriving from the reinterpretation of ancient archetypes such as theaters, amphitheaters, and hippodromes, which in the Renaissance became spaces for the representation of nature and art. The Boboli amphitheater, designed by Tribolo, is in vegetable matter, was transformed in the 17th century into a masonry structure paused by perimeter aedicules, a space for open-air performances centered on the rear facade of the palace. The amphitheater is the oldest court theater in Florence, used from its origins as a venue for summer performances, especially carousels and ballets on horseback with a wide scenic range. Among the great performances was the one at the end of June 1661, the Mondo Festeggiante, celebrating world, with stupendous machinery and scenes by Ferdinando Tacca for the wedding of Cosimo III to Margarita Luisa de Orleans. New portions with the different settings were added over the years to the initial late Renaissance layout, visible in the nucleus closest to the palace. Along the axis parallel to the palace, the perspectives axis of the alleyway was created, from which gravel-covered paths led to small lakes, fountains, nymphae, temples, and grottos. The importance of the statues and buildings in the garden is remarkable, such as the 18th century Cafe House, a rare example of Rococo style in Tuscany, which offers a view of the city, or the Limonaia, still in its original Lorraine green color. Even today, in summer, the Boboli Gardens hosts evenings of music, opera, symphony, jazz, and chamber concerts. Every year, the Regeneration Festival promotes and organizes this musical event. This year, the collaboration with the Uffizi galleries has an added value: the desire to relaunch a sector that has been seriously affected by the pandemic, that of culture, and in particular of live entertainment, with its entire sector of artists, workers, and employees, an initiative that has been enthusiastically joined by many other city institutions and entities operating in the cultural sector, such as the Fondazione Mascarade Opera, the Corsini, events groups, the festival's operating partner, as well as general international donors who have shown that they care about music, art, and the cultural project behind this initiative. If Boboli is the Renaissance prototype of the garden theater, the theatrical metaphor is emphasized by the Verzura theaters, places for summer performances, which are one of the main features of Italian gardens. A theme that the Italian scenic culture transmitted to the great European gardens, starting with Versailles, where Italian set designers such as Vigarani were involved. the Verzura theatres organized with connected but distinct spaces for the stalls and the stage, with evergreen wings, were born at the time as a modern theatre. This was established in Florence with the drama in music of the Camerata dei Bardi, a group of noblemen who in the last decades of the 16th century met to discuss music, literature, science, and arts. The development of the theme led in the musical field to the elaboration of a recitative style capable of cadencing common speech and singing. Initially, this style was applied to simple monodies or intermezzos, and then it was applied to more articulated compositional forms. One of the first to pursue the aims of the circle of musicians was Vincenzo Galilei, father of Galileo, with the music of Dante's Canto del Conte Ugolino, followed by Giulio Caccini with his Nuove Musiche, 1601, for solo voice and basso continuo accompaniment, which was to develop into recitar cantando, and from here into 18th and 19th century opera theatre. The transposition of a specialized space, such as the theatre, into plant matter spread throughout Europe, starting with the oldest example of an open-air performance venue. The theatre at Villa Reale Marlia, dating back to 1650, where Paganini played for Princess Elisa Bonaparte Bacchiocchi. The small theatres in Italian gardens are venues for the arcades and the performances and entertainment that take place in summer season. This is the aspect that ties in with the summer of the Italian garden, living in all its forms, the home to be lived in during the summer season. This aspect, which derives from a historical use of the garden, is still perpetuated today with the theatrical performances, concerts, exhibitions, and activities that are concentrated in the summer months and bring the space en plein air back to life. A space that gave the opportunity to perform shows and entertainment en plein air, extending to the very concept of the garden as a grand theatre. The most fitting example of this development of Italian stagecraft in the garden is Collodi's Villa Garzoni, where the Verdura Theatre is the quintessence of the garden itself, conceived as a veritable theatrical machine. Collodi's is in fact a garden theatre, conceived as a space for representation of myths and nature. At the basis of this organization of the garden is a theatrical conception which alternates evergreen wings with open spaces prepared for the seasonal extras of the garden. Annual and perennial flowers, roses, and aromatic plants bordered by dwarf boxwood. The light from the central stage contrasts with the side groves that act as backdrops to the stage. The design of the theatre is clearly legible in the 18th century plan, which shows the stalls at the entrance of the garden bordered by high cypress hedges with parterre embroidered with regional flowers and stone and glaze mosaics, and the sequence of the statues alluding to the myth of the metamorphosis, with Apollo as the sun god par excellence, while the figures of the villagers and their families are alluded to in the plan. Marking several points along the garden path evoke the domestic aspect of farming, the seasonal work of the countryside. The stalls are horseshoe-shaped according to the typology perfected by theatrical treaty writers. Think only of Fernando Gali Bibiena's treaty of the early 18th century. From the stalls, the view arises towards the stage emphasized by the monumental staircase and introduced by the figures of satyrs outlining an ideal arch scene. This frames the spectacle of the central water theatre from which the wings formed by evergreen hedges and holm oak groves branch off. The allegory of Fame dominates the narrative of the central scene, enriched by statues referring to the myths of the nature of the place, the rivers, the aquatic animals, the anamorphic mask, Enceladus, the monster brother of Fame, Neptune's caves under the steppes. A staging of the garden itself that reserves a lateral space for the theatre of greenery, between the grandiose scenography of the waters and the myth and the palazzo that rises laterally as an entity in itself with respect to the garden. If Collodi's theatre, by virtue of its very form and conception, can be enjoyed in every season, the summer opens up to multiple uses with concert shows, exhibitions, and fireworks, where the spectacle within the spectacle gives the figure of the summer enjoyment of the garden in Collodi as in other Italian gardens.
Thank you very much for a wonderful and sunny tale. And in front of you, Robert Makłowicz, who, like nobody else, can encourage to traveling and looking for culinary inspirations in the world of garden traditions.
The distinguished lecturer spoke about the gardens of sunny Italy, or the sunny gardens of Italy, among others the Medici gardens. I would like to address what Italy has given Europe and the world from a culinary standpoint. That contribution is much greater than we would imagine. We have somewhere in the back of our head a conviction that modern European cuisine owes greatest to France. But this is a half-truth, because in reality, in the 19th century, the influence of French cuisine into world cuisine was great. However, French propagators of cuisine, such as, for example, Escoffier or Karen, took most from the achievements of and attainments of Italian cuisine, and this is what I would like to speak to. At the beginning of the 14th century, in the culinary Florentine book available today, we have 57 recipes, and many of these dishes are unchanged till today. I would like to emphasize once again that we're speaking about the beginning of the 14th century. So in that cooking book we have ravioli, tortelli, so large dumplings. Tortellini are a smaller type of dumplings. And tortelli, we have macaroni. Macaroni more similar to today's gnocchi, so a type of potato dumpling. At that time, of course, we didn't have potatoes in Europe at that time, but we're speaking about the shape. Then we have pasticci, kimbali. We have entirely modern ways of preparing freshwater fish from the Arno River based on, for example, garlic and olive oil. We have spinach, we have cards, we have a palette of sweets which are being made till today. For example, marzipan. As we know, marzipan is made from almonds. We have rosewater and orange water, so the Roman and Maghrebian influences in Florentine cuisine. We have also, finally, things which today are not practiced anymore. For example, even though the name has been preserved. Many of the dishes in this book, especially meat, are called dolce forte, so sweet and sour. Usually these are combinations of meat with fruits, sour fruits, strongly spiced. The purpose of this was to mask the unfresh, not so fresh taste of meat. Let's remember that we are talking about the pre-cooler, pre-refrigerating era. And then also dolce colle, which is a rabbit, sweet and sour rabbit. This is one of the standard Sicilian dishes till today. This is a book from the beginning of the 14th century from Florence. But for a moment, let's go to Ferrara, neighboring, where not the Medicis but the Este family was ruling for centuries. One of the organizers of the stewards of events of this princely family was in the 16th century Cristoforo di Messibugo. He was managing the court and responsible for the banquets. And he totally revolutionized the cuisine in Ferrara, but also through the influence of the cookbook which he published, titled Banchetti. He revolutionized European cuisine, and at this time you could have called it world cuisine. What did he do? First of all, he broke with the tradition, which was based on the fact that if something was baked, for example, meat, then you put it on the table and the feasters would rip it apart. He introduced utensils and served portions, so portions of meat. At that time, that was entirely a revolution. Also, in his cookbook, we have also the first way of obtaining caviar from a sturgeon and serving the sturgeon and preserving it. Sturgeons at the time were in the ponds, and Cristoforo in Padua, Cristoforo came up with the idea how to use this from a culinary standpoint, and it was much earlier than the Russians came up with the same idea. His merits were so great that in 1543, the Roman Emperor of the German nation, Charles V, titled him the Court Palatine. The Banchetti publication had many further publications, and it was fundamental to the world at that time because it made of eating, of feasting, a new type of pleasure, a spiritual pleasure. Something which is to serve pleasure not only when you're sitting at the table and ripping off a piece of meat, but the artism of it. This is who we owe Cristoforo de' Messi, whose memory in Ferrara is honored extremely. And I had the opportunity to see that for myself. In 1533, he was established the Palatine, but that same year, Catherine de' Medici moved to Paris, becoming the Queen of France. She was a great glutton and also a big drinker, in the good sense of that word. Many times her gluttony nearly brought her to death from overeating, but her love of cuisine meant that the change of European history in cuisine changed. She came to France with her Florentine cooks and chefs and introduced from her family home the customs that she knew. So she brought to France sauce based on milk and flour, a sauce which later became a bechamel sauce. which received the name from a French aristocrat. And people think till today that this is an invention of the French, but it's a Florentine and Tuscany invention. She brought crepes and she brought orange sauce. So crepes and orange sauce, crepes Suzette, something which French cuisine is famous of until today. This is an old Renaissance Florentine invention. Orange sauce at that time was used also for baking, especially for baked duck and roasted duck. And what today is associated with French cuisine, it's duck, baked roasted duck, breast of duck in orange sauce, or whole duck in roasted sauce. This is also a merit of Catherine de' Medici, an ode to Catherine de' Medici. Also, there is Florentine spinach and bechamel spinach. This is also thanks to Catherine de' Medici, who brought not only bechamel, but spinach, peas, artichokes. All of that was unknown in Paris at the time. Until today, in all of Tuscany, they eat crostini di fegatini. Crostini di fegatini are toasts from an unsalted Tuscan bread with a paste made on the basis of liver. And what did this bring a beginning to, this fegatini? Pâtés. The French are known worldwide as inventors of pâté. Of course, they perfected the Florentine concept, but the beginnings are with Catherine de' Medici. She could not withhold herself from eating something, then she passionately consumed it, which is done in Florence and is called cibreo. Cibreo is a dish from rooster gizzards, which was also previously with the comb and the corals of roosters and the testicles of roosters. Today it's very difficult to get to that, so cibreo are usually just the gizzards, such as the liver, the heart, the stomach, and this dish, which is thickened with egg yolks and lemon juice, but without rooster testicles. I ate this once, unfortunately without rooster testicles. If you would like to consume those, the only place where I saw that it's relatively available is in Hungary. There it's called kokos here perkert. So today, eating such things as a duck in orange or pâté, the famous French word, eating bechamel, named after Marquis de Bechamel. When we're eating all of these things, let's remember that these are the Italian inventions, Tuscan inventions. It's Carême and Escoffier who reached for those old recipes and creatively transformed them, and they went out into the world. So let's remember about Catherine de' Medici, and let's remember Florence.
Thank you very much for an extraordinary tale, and we are moving close to Poznań, to Radek's and Łukasz's farm, who, inspired by Mr. Makłowicz's tale, decided to cook something themselves. Their recipe for a delicious dish you can obviously use in your own kitchen, and by this occasion you can see how to decorate a table with elegance and spontaneous lightness typical to Italy. We are kindly inviting you. Hi, welcome from our farm. We have the middle of summer, nearly. Today we are going to talk, well, what are we going to talk about today? Today we are just going to show you how you can live in the Polish countryside, but in the Italian style. Today's sunny Italian gardens, well, We do not have too many Renaissance elements here, but we do have roses, lots of roses. We planted lavender, and we have the most important part of the garden, which is the vegetable garden. We will concentrate on it today. We are going also to show you how to prepare decoration of the table, summer table. How do you say summer in Italian? L'estate. Okay, andiamo, let's go on the Italian journey. All the flowers, once we bring them home, especially the ones from the field, we have to peel them from all the leaves until that height, so that they are clear from leaves, so that we do not put leaves into the jar, because the bacteria will develop and then the flowers will last shorter. Here we have corn, cockle. I usually peel everything in the field so that this organic material is left over there. We've got garlic here, but this type of leaves you can leave, but the one below, I think it's take it off. Here the same. We have to remember that usually leaves are the first to age in a plant, so it does not look very aesthetic either. So here we can leave these endings, the short ones. In carrot, we also take off the top leaves, calendula. And a very important thing that I'm going to show to you in a minute is that once you pick up flowers from a meadow or various herbs, it's really worth blanching them. So I'm going to show to you how to do it exactly, because they will last longer. When flowers are cut in the middle of the day, they get so-called shock. This is a stressful situation in which we have to balance a little bit this situation, and we have to give them some water because the stem is is cut and is sucking in air. Normally it would suck in water. So it is worth remembering always that once you bring these flowers from a meadow where we pick them up during the day, we have to blanch them. Here you can see that these leaves are a little bit flopped due to lack of water. So we make them even so that they are at the same height, at the same level of the stem. We have to move some of them a little bit. Have you got a jar over there? Yes, I have. So could you please pour there 2 centimeters of boiling water there? We cut them evenly. We have to remember to cut stems evenly. It's best to do it with very sharp scissors or secateur with double blade, so that we do not mash them. So it's great, and now we are going to put them into the jar with boiling water, and we blanch them. We leave them until the moment, more or less 30 minutes, well, let's say until the water cools down. And that's all. Today I am going to prepare my favorite recipe. This is broad beans, which you can have only in summer. So when it is available, we eat it a lot. This is going to be broad beans with marjoram and butter fried. So we have to remember that you have to put vegetable into boiling water so that we are able to keep all the vitamins and substances, nutrition substances in them. I have just brought my blanched flowers. You can see where the blanching is. So once we put the flowers, we are going to cut them above blanching place. I would like to show you a very simple decoration for a garden party or Sunday lunch on veranda, where you can make it more celebrating, putting some flowers. You don't have to buy them in a flower shop, but you can pick them up from the meadow, and they will be a typically summer topic during our Italian party. Our Italian lunch has already been eaten, and we are going to go to siesta, but we would like to invite you to open doors on the 15th of August to our farm. There will be a lot of attractions. You will be able to see our flowers, and you will be able to try all the countryside goodies. And see you in a month's time in our last episode, and we are going to sum up all our 12-month meetings. Thank you very much, and see you. Bye-bye. We would like to thank very much to Łukasz and Radek for sharpening our appetite just before supper. Vegetables smell very much even here and mix with fragrance of garden flowers. We also invite to open days on the 15th of August to Kwiaty i Miód farm, which will be open to everybody. And in a month's time, we are going to have the last episode of our webinars. We are going to meet on the 8th of September in the second Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. The episode is devoted to water, which will efficiently quench a hot summer and introduce us to autumn climate. The episode is titled The Source of Life, Desire and Ambitions, the tale about the element of water in the garden art. The lecture will be delivered by Mr. Łukasz Przybylak, Vice President of European Trail of Historic Gardens, whom we associate most of all with Gardens of the King Jan III Palace at Wilanów. We kindly invite you.
Zająć się tym, co naprawdę ważne, bo inne ważne sprawy, jak koszenie trawy, zrobią się same, o każdej porze, niezależnie od pogody. A ty korzystaj z każdej chwili. Ciesz się życiem i doskonale skoszonym trawnikiem. Husqvarna. Roboty koszące Automower. Wejdź na husqvarna.pl i odwiedź dealera.
Historia firmy rozpoczęła się kilkanaście lat temu, kiedy to zaoferowaliśmy naszym klientom pierwsze urządzenia do pielęgnacji ogrodu. Były to kosiarki, podkaszarki, pilarki. W następnych latach poszerzyliśmy naszą ofertę o maszyny specjalistyczne, aeratory, kosiarki wrzecionowe, piaskarki. Jednak maszyny to nie wszystko.
Kolejnym etapem w rozwoju firmy było wprowadzenie specjalistycznych nawozów, nasion traw oraz sprzętu diagnostycznego. Pielęgnacja trawy to nie tylko koszenie, to szereg działań, które wymaga od nas pasji i zaangażowania. To tylko dzięki temu osiągniemy właściwy sukces. Wszystkie nasze działania opieramy na ludziach, na specjalistach, którzy na co dzień pracują na polach golfowych, boiskach i stadionach. To ciężka praca, wymagająca dużego zaangażowania, często 24 godziny na dobę.
To właśnie pasja doprowadziła nas do momentu, w którym mogliśmy uczestniczyć w wydarzeniach takich jak Mistrzostwa Świata i Europy w piłce nożnej w roku 2017 i 2019 oraz w jednym z najważniejszych turniejów golfowych w Polsce Grady Polish Open by Emerald w roku 2020.
Mieliśmy również zaszczyt być partnerem konferencji organizowanej na Zamku Królewskim w Warszawie pod tytułem Autentyzm, ochrona i zarządzanie. Dzisiaj na stałe doradzamy na ogrodach Zamku Królewskiego pod względem właściwej pielęgnacji trawników i ogrodów.
Chcemy dzielić się wiedzą i zarażać pasją kolejne pokolenia greenkeeperów i groundsmenów. Na naszych szkoleniach dla obiektów sportowych, pól golfowych, firm usługowych prezentujemy najnowsze rozwiązania z zakresu pielęgnacji muraw trawiastych. Przeprowadzamy audyty, doradzamy w inwestycjach związanych z budową stadionów piłkarskich i boisk. Każdego dnia poszukujemy odpowiedzi na pytanie, jak właściwie pielęgnować trawnik.
Nasz cel to szmaragdowy kolor, taki jak logo naszej firmy.
Podstawowym budulcem każdego ogrodu jest ziemia. Dlatego nasz spacer po królewskich ogrodach rozpoczniemy od zejścia pod ziemię. To tutaj, 4 metry pod ziemią, rozpoczyna się nasza 12-kilometrowa trasa nawadniająca ogrody. To również stąd sterujemy naszymi fontannami i oświetleniem. To była techniczna strona naszego ogrodu, a teraz wracamy na górę. Rabata kwietna to jedna z naszych największych atrakcji. 4 razy w sezonie zmieniamy jej wygląd, aby zawsze była piękna i świeża. Zabytkowy labirynt grabowy to serce naszego ogrodu. To na nim oparto ideę odtworzenia ogrodów dolnych, gdyż najstarsze drzewa przetrwały działania wojenne. Trawiasty wgłębnik w centralnej części naszego ogrodu to oddech dla kompozycji ogrodów dolnych. Świeża i zielona trawa przyciąga uwagę naszych zwiedzających, a trawnik wygląda świetnie w każdej porze roku. Ogrody zamkowe to także ostoja zwierzyny. Ptaki i drobne zwierzęta futerkowe to nasi stali bywalcy. Obecnie znajdujemy się w Boskiecie Południowym, który nie przetrwał działań wojennych i został w całości odtworzony. Warto tu także zajrzeć przez wzgląd na fantastyczną rzeźbę smoczycy, która od niedawna gości w naszych ogrodach. Królewskie Ogrody to niepowtarzalne miejsce na mapie Warszawy, idealne do odpoczynku i relaksu. Każda rezydencja królewska marzy o tym, aby posiadać własną odmianę róży, w ogóle własną odmianę kwiatu. Posiadanie takiej odmiany jest wyjątkowe pod każdym względem, zarówno pod kątem odmiany, jak i pod kątem samego posiadania, gdyż nie jest to działalność łatwa, aby wyhodować taką różę i nabyć ją na własność. W Zamku Królewskim w Warszawie również mamy ten historyczny moment, kiedy róża przyjechała do zamku i będziemy mieć własną odmianę. Nazwa Królowa Warszawy nawiązuje zarówno do historii ogrodnictwa i historii sztuki ogrodowej, jak i do tego, gdzie się znajdujemy, czyli rezydencja królów i Rzeczypospolitej.
Znajdujemy się w ogrodach dolnych Zamku Królewskiego w Warszawie. Mogę sobie tylko wyobrazić, jak bardzo cieszyłby się król Stanisław, kiedy po 123 latach, trudnych dla Polski i bardzo różnych, wreszcie jego projekt został zrealizowany. A jak nie świętować inaczej, jak w dobry sposób, nadając imię dla róży, która ma uświetnić ogrody Zamku Królewskiego. Bywa tak, że to róża uświetnia miejsce, dodaje mu splendoru. Bywa też odwrotnie, że to samo miejsce dodaje splendoru róży. W połączeniu tych dwóch motywacji, jeżeli się uda, powstaje fenomen, który przekracza ludzkie życie, w pewien sposób dając i róży, i miejscu nieśmiertelność. I chrzest róży, nadanie jej nowego imienia jest również takim celebrowaniem życia, dobrą chwilą i dla miejsca, i dla ogrodu, i dla nas wszystkich.